So next up on our list, as we talk about codependent sisters and toxic relationships, whatever happened to Baby Jane?
Yes, indeed.
Blanche and Jane Hudson. So for either one of us, we both have watched Baby Jane before, right? Like for me, I knew it was.
No, this was my first time seeing it as well. I honestly picked this movie on because you had that list, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, I don't know what this movie is, and I want to
Mm-hmm.
watch it just because of the cast.
Yes.
I was like Joan Crawford and Betty Dape. Like, I want to see this movie. What is this film?
Mm-hmm.
So I actually requested that we talk about it just so I have an excuse to watch it.
Oh, wonderful.
Um, yeah, it's a thriller, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
I'd say it's a thriller more
Yeah.
so. And that kind of thrillers are always kind of like pseudo supernatural.
Mm-hmm.
But I would say that that's where it falls. I think in like its direction,
Mm-hmm.
like the way that they decided to put these camera, it kind of feels vaguely reminiscent of like a Hitchcock kind of like type of vibe, which so it
Yeah.
has this like horror veneer on it,
Mm-hmm.
but it is in fact just like a thriller drama. Like it's not like, nothing like
Yeah.
really magical
Mm-hmm.
happens in it. It just has this like kind of sinister, like all that doll, her doll was creepy. Like it's
Yes.
really trying to creep you out just that she
Mm-hmm.
still has her doll, that she hands it to that guy that's supposed to be her partner, like
Yeah, she's
in her new
infantile the whole thing.
tour.
Mm-hmm.
And then she like puts on the same dress that she wore when she's a kid and tries to like do the same act. And she's got that weird like stage rehearsal light thing and the whole like baby doll. I'm like, this is very creepy.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. I think.
there's murder. That's
Mm-hmm.
creepy.
Mm-hmm.
So I can see why like it almost kind of feels like some kind of like supernaturally kind of horror type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
It rides that like line. I guess because you're just talking about obsession.
Yeah. I feel like whatever happened to Baby Jane, like it brought out like right after whatever happened to Baby Jane, you had all these movies that came out that were kind of like it, like Hush Hush, Sweet Charlotte, and but I think Sunset Boulevard was like right before or maybe right after, where you had all these actresses that were like just bugging out to be woman and to be old, right? It's almost like
Yeah.
a
Ooh.
manifestation of menopause, right? Like you just bug out. You always hovering after like when you were young. But I think whatever happened to Baby Jane is the epitome of or the manifestation of hell is other people. It's not fire
Yeah.
and brimstone, hell is other people. And you have this toxic bond between sisters. Um, One that, has been famous when she was young and she provided for everyone and she never gets over that adulation, but, because it goes away just as a lot of child stars have trouble with when they grow up. And then the other sister becomes famous in her maturity. And then after this accident, they're like stuck together and stuck together over a lie and a secret. Blanche told Jane that she did this to her and is keeping her in this locked emotional state that you've always, been so mean to me and all this, and the whole time it was Blanche's fault. Just like what? But the cruelty they
Yeah.
launch after each
I
other.
I mean, for so much of that movie, her boozy day drinking sister would come in and do these horrible things to her. And then it just gets worse and worse. It just gets into like elder care abuse or something. And
Yeah.
I'm like, she's terrible. I want her to escape. Why isn't she just sliding down this banister on her stomach? Like, I was like yelling at my laptop, like
Yes.
so frustrated with Joan Crawford. I was like, look, all you got to do is this to get away. And there were times when I felt like she didn't really
Mm-hmm.
do everything that she could to escape. And I started to wonder, like,
Mm-hmm.
how come she's not yelling right now? There's somebody in the house. She could just yell. Like, how come she's not
Mm-hmm.
throwing more things out of the window and trying to get the neighbor? Like, she just
Mm-hmm.
seemed to be pulling her punches. And I was like, is it just that she feels
I think she
guilty?
feels.
But I remember when her sister, when they were young and they had that scene and her sister was being a real brat.
Mm-hmm.
And her mother says, oh, just remember, you know, one day things will work out for you, and I just want you to be kinder to them than they have been to you. You
Mm-hmm.
know, just remember this moment. And the, you know, Joan Crawford, Minnie Joan Crawford is like, oh yeah, I'm gonna remember. And it sounded kind of sinister, like she intended to get revenge.
Yeah.
And so the whole time, like as it, like the abuse gets worse, I start to wonder, like I started to wonder about her, like
Mm-hmm.
is she like kind of being, is this like a weaponized victimhood?
Yeah, I think
Because
for
she was
both of
such a
them, it's
victim for
yeah.
so long. I was
Mm-hmm.
like, are you leaning into this? Because I think,
Yeah, I
like, do
think
you like this? What's going
mm-hmm.
on?
Yeah, I feel like Blanche definitely does, and it works well with as who Joan Crawford is as an actress, right? Because she
Yeah.
always played that part, like this underdog, this like the world is oppressing me type character, and it just works for her. And I think, you know, and that's the toxicity of it, is like,
Yeah.
yeah, Blanche could have definitely got up out of this situation at any time. You're talking about, this is now 20 years later, 20 to 30 years later, and you're still in this situation. You have this maid, you're obviously thinking about moving ahead, because now you understand, in spite of being, you know, a victim for so long and being cared for, you understand that Blanche has, you know, I'm sorry, not Blanche, Jane has lost it, and you want to sell the house and institutionalize her. Like that boat kind of left the dock a little bit ago. I mean, you can still swim to it, but still. And I think for Jane, just the double trauma, like she never got over that people didn't like her anymore, you know, that height of fame, that fall from fame. And then on top of that, you know, hurting her sister, because there's, you know, there's some love there, but it's a toxic love, you know. And how creepy how it manifests is like just the horrible things we do to each other in relationships where it's like they're almost, you know, they're just locked in hatred, in this
Locked
emotional,
in hatred is so
yeah,
apt.
like an
It's not love.
emotional,
They're just
locked in
locked in
hatred,
hatred.
yeah, in this
Yeah.
emotional
And it
purgatory.
really serves them.
Mm-hmm.
Like as much as like one was abusing the other, it
Mm-hmm.
was like it was almost consensual.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like at the end when she finally tells her, because she's about to be arrested, she's like, you didn't run me over, I lied to you.
Yeah, because
And
she's
so it's
about
like,
to
so
die. You.
she became an alcoholic because of this, and you let her do it. Like you
Mm-hmm.
didn't tell her
Mm-hmm.
at any point in
Yeah.
time that
Mm-hmm.
she didn't do this to you, and you saw her
Mm-hmm.
like crippling herself in a way, you know, in a different way. And it's like,
Yeah.
and you didn't think to tell her until you were dying on this beach. I'm like, you guys are both awful.
Yeah. Which is
Both
like
just
one of those best
awful.
lines. Yeah, it is an amazing scene as well. Like, and Betty Davis has that line where, you mean this whole time we could have been friends? And she says it so creepy because she's just gone.
She's done.
you
Yeah, she's
mean
done.
you
She's
mean
had the
this whole
break.
time we could have been friends? And you're like, oh, the situation
But it's
just
like, you know what though? But yeah, do you mean this whole time we could have been friends? It's like apt, right? It's like
mm-hmm.
we didn't have to do any of this, and it's decades of our lives that we spent at each other's throats.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And we could have actually been sisters.
Yeah, we could have been
We could have
sisters.
been family.
Mm-hmm.
um I wonder also, you know, to go back to like women aging in Hollywood,
Mm-hmm.
is this just about that? It's about like what happens when you don't tap into sisterhood, right? Like
Mm-hmm. That you don't, yeah. Because I
Ginger
think,
Snaps and this are both films in which like they didn't really utilize sisterhood in a way that could uplift either one of them.
yeah. Yeah, it was more hanging on to the codependency that was, and
Yeah, so they destroyed each other
mm-hmm.
in both of those films. They like, because they
Yeah.
don't use it in a way that is good,
Yeah.
um or that is uplifting and empowering. They just really just kind of end up destroying one another. Like they eat each, I mean, they might as well, in Baby Jane, they might as well have eaten each other. Like,
Yes. Yeah. she was on her way. I mean, just doing these like childish pranks, the part with the rat. Baby
Oh yeah, all
Jane
the
is
dead
just
animals in her food. I was like, this is so funny. It's like rats. She killed her bird. I was like, I saw that bird a mile away. When she came back with that empty cage, I was like, she killed that bird.
yeah.
She's and then when she gave, I was not surprised when it ended up on her plate. I was like, of course she kept the body. This woman is crazy.
Yes. Oh my god. Oh, and I just thought about like I'm just reading my notes right now. How continue this that last scene where there is Blanche's last attempt to get some type of help, like you need to call the police. She's like, if I die you'll be alone. And I think that touches on Ginger Snaps as well. Like we're locked together in hatred. We're locked together in this. We're in this together in the most toxic way. If I die you'll be alone. If I change you'll be alone, instead of getting over this hump. And I guess last thoughts on Baby Jane, but like that was, that I feel like there was at the time it was like an exploration, not just of like women aging, but perhaps what was going on society wise, because it's like early 60s. We haven't gotten to like the part of the 60s that we remember, like all the things that people associate with the 60s is really after 1965. But there was like this beginning idea of like the dream of the 50s wasn't panning out. And understandably, like that dream needed to be there. If you think of that generation that comes together in the 50s, this ideal 50s of like suburban and the house and the home and all those really good things, and wives that are happy to be housewives, like that generation had grown up with the Dust Bowl, the Depression, and a World War, and then they finally get married and they're like, we're going to make this idyllic as possible. And we don't ever want anything to change. And I feel like whether they want to acknowledge it or not, I feel like it started bubbling up to the surface that this wasn't working, that the dream had now become a nightmare, that because we wanted so 180 of what was like coming out of like a depression, a dust bowl, and a stock market crash,
a war,
and a war
No,
that
I get it.
and maybe able to, and now is the atomic age. We might, might someone will drop a bomb that you wanted things idyllic as possible, and it led just to toxicity. Like it was better to be with the devil than the things outside you don't know. And I think with movies like Whatever Happened to Baby Jane and Hush Hush Sweet Hush Hush Sweet Charlotte, and even Sunset Boulevard, because that's the downward tumble of another woman who was famous in her youth, and now life has been cruel to her. That
it's all kind of like metaphors for dying dynasties, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's like the thrill is gone.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's just me and you in a big empty house with these creepy dolls that nobody wants to buy.
Just reliving the old days. Okay, so now let's switch over to better sisterhoods. I feel practical magic. Practical magic,
which was the opposite of everything that we're talking about. Like they really used sisterhood to uplift and empower them and get them out of going to jail. Incidentally,
yes. So Sally
they
and
use
Jillian,
it as a get out of jail.
get out of jail card and get a husband at the same time.
They really worked that to their advantage. And it again, like a connection. Again, it's matriarchal, right? It's passed down from mother to mother to mother. It's all women. They have daughters. There's like they're even cursed. The men die. Like the men can't even stay around them. So it's very much about like what my mom told me, what I'm gonna tell you. Even her decision, Sandra Bullock's decision to like, don't teach them magic. I'm not teaching them magic. Trying to deny them of a legacy to protect them from the rest of the town, right? That whole like conversation that was happening in there, and the girls being frustrated, like, I want to cast a spell. Why won't you let me do this thing that's mine, you know?
Yeah.
I thought that was really interesting. That movie is kind of crazy. It's a little all over the place because it seems like it's going to be one movie at the beginning and then it takes a turn dramatically and it's a totally different film for the third act. And I was like, what is this movie now? What really struck me is that they had a joyful exorcism, which I don't think I've ever seen anywhere else. In any movie anywhere on the planet. Where I'm like, wait, hold up. So Nicole Kidman is possessed by her dead ex-boyfriend, abusive ex-boyfriend, and there's joyful music playing. Like, she's possessed.
Yeah.
And they have to strap her to a chair. But then there's like all these like Disney music happening when they like push
that
the
flute
chair.
That
there's
plays.
Like there's like toads coming out of the bottom of the chair, and her daughters are like, ha ha, we're gonna save Auntie. And then that mom tree, like that PTA meeting mom tree that Sandra Bullock calls to create a coven. And I was like, what? And these women come over with brooms and they perform an exorcism, and it's like it was like a thing, like a great girls' night out.
Yeah.
And the music behind it and the lighting and the everything is still like very Disney. And then they like sweep his ashes into the backyard where he's buried, and nobody questions that.
No.
Like, no one asks, like, why is his body in your backyard?
Yeah. No one stopped to be like, wait a minute, there's a body here?
Like, wait, did you kill this man? Like, no one cares about this dude. They just sweep him, and then he's like dead. They throw that cauldron of whatever it was on him, and they're like, yay, witches. And I'm like, this is the craziest.
Could you imagine if you had a bad breakup? Because I've had a bad breakup. If you just could get a drum circle, a dance circle, you know, like they said, I forgot who said it. There's a woman who quoted, in times of great sorrow needs furious dancing. I don't remember if it's Toni Morrison or Alice Walker who said it, and it was like a proverb. It was a matriarchal proverb that there used to be a time where we could get together as women, and whether it was a sorrowful time, you can exercise this thing out. So I remember, it hasn't always been in my head, but sometimes I think about, like, what if, like, you had a breakup, like people have these divorce parties, but what if you just did a ritual? You know, you don't have to get all witchy, but get a good group of ladies around, and just sweep this shit out or dance it out and just dance the sorrow. If someone could hold that sorrow for you, especially in this, type of situation, because it's uberly toxic, like he's possessive of her.
Oh, it was an abusive relationship.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm looking over here because my cat is like, I think he wants to be on the camera. I don't know.
Speaking of witches.
Yeah, he must have heard, and he was like, what? C'est moi? Yes. So that movie just kind of blew me away, and its joyfulness of, like, it almost felt like a commercial for witchcraft where they were like, be a witch, it's super fun. But what I thought was really interesting also was, like, so many of those women were the kids that were like, you're a witch, and then their kids were like, you're a witch, and they were all mean. And then at the end when she calls her, she was like, she had that line, with that one woman who was super mean. I didn't think you would come. I'm surprised to see you here. And she said, I've always wanted to see the inside of your house.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, is that like a lesson that, like, all they really wanted was to be included?
Yeah.
Like, is that what I'm supposed to take from this? That all these women they didn't hate witches. They were just sad that they weren't one. And they just wanted to do magic with you. That was it. That's it. That's all. They just needed to, like, be invited to an exorcism. Yeah. Because they were really chill about it. And I'm like, I don't know how I would have felt about that phone call. I would have been like, I don't know if I really know you like this. Also, what? What? He possessed your sister? What?
Yeah, I never
They
thought
were
of it
so
that way.
happy to be there. And I was like, whoa, this town must be really boring because I think I'd be
I think it
scared.
is. It's like I run a dust fester. Is that okay?
Yeah, they were like really like, okay, yeah, great. I'll do this with you.
Hmm.
Um,
But I think it's
but
also a great story of like not only generational trauma, but like what we teach generationally as far as, you know, biases and hatred. Because that town, they only hate this one family in spite of going to them for what they need and going, you know, having them
well,
be
yeah.
there for centuries and centuries. You know, this one family is there, and you didn't run them out of town yet or anything like that. And it's like, you know, I guess you could always say magic powers, but still, you know. And then on the other side, as far as the Owens is, the women generation after generation, where something, I think Sally even says it after a while, like a single thought becomes, not Sally, one of the sisters, I think,
Mm,
one of the aunts, um, Frances or Jet, says that after a while, sometimes a thought can become a curse, you know,
yeah.
and
I thought that
it's,
was interesting.
yeah, practical magic always hit me right at home, just because like my family has been 90% female, and then like we've had women in our family that have like the gift or whatever,
Mm,
and then a majority of us have never really married. Like I'm doing the family tree, and like even back to like you're talking in 1920s, or I'm 4 generations back and I can't find husbands. So I remember looking at that and how matriarchal my family was. And it's only recently, as I thought about my own relationships and generational traumas, that's come up in the ether, being like, okay, our family motto, which is all women, is God bless the child that has its own. And I wonder, like, which matriarch in our family where that at the time that was a really good idea, because I can only assume it's like a slave, that she felt if she had ownership of her own body and of her own life and ownership of her own kids, at the time that was a blessing, or that's a fierce determination on her part. And then of
mm-hmm.
course if she has daughters, she's going to teach them like you need to have sovereignty
Yeah.
of your own. You don't need anybody else. Now me 5 to 6 generations later, that becomes a mindset where I don't need anyone, and I'm readily accept that, like, yeah, like I'll probably just have like a baby by myself. It's like something we just automatically assume in our family. And it's not that we don't love
Mm,
men, but we start to understand it's like, and it's not even my baby when I have my daughter. And that's something I've always associated with practical magic. I'm like, oh, at some point, a single thought became almost like, now in my generation, we're like, are we cursed? Did we curse ourselves? Did someone curse us? Did we take someone's husband?
yeah.
Like, what happened?
I mean, it's the idea. I mean, it's just ideas, right? And then the ideas
Mm-hmm.
become culture, and they become tradition.
Mm-hmm.
And so the magic is in the thinking. Someone
Mm-hmm.
thought it so hard, and you guys keep thinking it, and so it's true,
Yeah, it's true. And, you know,
right?
and to me, in some ways, there's strength in that. Like, I know I can call on my aunts. I'm learning to think
And
about like
there's
one day having children and like thinking, what if it's a boy? Instead of automatically, I'm going to name my daughter, blah, blah, blah.
and that I feel like it's such a perfect segue into Charmed.
Yes.
Can we segue into that?
Yes, we can.
Feel like that's like a great opening
Mm-hmm.
because I remember the season where Piper finds out that she's having a son and how that like messes with the ethos of Charmed, which
Yes,
is
with
super
Wyatt.
matriarchal. It
Mm-hmm.
is like it's passed down from daughter to daughter to daughter to daughter, and you've seen
Mm-hmm.
seasons where they conjure up their ancestors. And I
Mm-hmm.
remember this because this is one of the few shows where like white women talk about ancestors and like you know what I'm saying?
That's so
Like
true.
they don't even say that word usually. So like they're talking about it, which is so it was very Wiccan. It was
Mm-hmm.
very Wiccan,
Yes.
right? It was very like Europe before the church hit it.
Yeah. Well, it
It was
was
very that.
Charm was created by, I keep forgetting her name, but her first name is Constance, and she was True Blue. witch. So like that first season is really, if you look at it, like there's spells and it's lack of like really active fantastical stuff. I feel she left the show as a consultant like around season 3, but
Mm.
to me that's right when charm hits its stride. Like not to take something a project away from a person, but I think she's doing all right.
I'm sure
Um,
she's fine.
I'm sure she's fine. She hasn't said anything about it. But going from this very stringent kind of Wiccan type of ideal to almost a more fantastical show, I feel helped it grow. But at the same time, like you look at those first 2 seasons, and it is there. Like they're
It's
going back to Salem and
very
talking about Melinda.
it's very Wiccan, you know. I mean,
Mhm.
from the iconography to how they cast the spells to the fact that it needs to be, it's the power of 3, you know, the number
Mhm.
3, and then it is through women, you know, and it
Mhm.
is through the blood. And so I loved that when she, you know, Piper, who is now graduated to being the older sister, you know,
Mhm.
gets pregnant, and she's the next to sort of like bring about, extend the legacy, and then it ends up being a boy, and how
Mhm.
disappointed just how disappointed everybody
Yeah, I
was.
remember that moment when she had the kid.
Deeply
Like
disappointed.
that whole that episode where she has Wyatt. I remember like it being so action packed, and they're like, they're finally gonna have the baby. They already decided like the baby's name was gonna be Melinda. And then they're like, oh, and then Phoebe, because Phoebe catches him, like delivers him, and she's like, everyone stops because Paige goes like, "Is that what I think it is?" And Phoebe goes, "You mean the little winky between the legs?" Yes, it is. And like that's I like that they acknowledged and worked with that going forward, even to like the wickening or rather christening where they bring Penny the high priest their grandma Rams back and she's like, "It's a boy." They're like, "We assumed you knew because like you're on the other
Yeah, you're supposed to
side."
be like omniscient or something. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but
I think
the
it's interesting because it plays your, to talk about your sister trope. Like, okay, so Charmed is one where most of the time the sisterhood empowers them. Like, they really want to reinforce that, like, women sticking by each other
mm-hmm.
um, is the best way to go, right? And so they lose the power of 3 when they stop doing that. They're literally stripped of power,
Yeah.
literally, if
Mm-hmm.
they don't help each other. So I feel like you can't get any more like on the head, right, with it
Mm-hmm.
than that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so by the time she has this baby that's a man, that's a
Mm-hmm.
boy, they get to explore this thing where this our like natural mistrust of men.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't mean just us as women, I mean like in general. Like
Yeah.
everybody was like, the reasons that it's daughters is because we can trust them to make the right call, essentially to think of the greater good, and
Mm-hmm.
we can't trust a boy to do that. And then like
Yeah.
for so much of the series after that, it was really all about like whether Wyatt is going to be evil or not, and
Yeah.
like people vying to get a hold of him so they could turn him,
Mm-hmm.
which is not something that I think anybody was in pursuit of when when the sisters were girls. Like no one was thinking, I'm going to
No.
kidnap the charmed one and change her mind.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody thought that. They
No.
only begin to think about corrupting a child when it's a son.
Yeah.
And I wonder, I feel like that's a confession of something of ours, that like that's a storyline that I'm used to hearing of, like, and then we'll get this boy and we'll, you know, like if you, I mean, to go to like the big franchise Star Wars, isn't that what Darth Vader was? Like,
Mm-hmm.
isn't that, was that the whole point of that, is that like he
Yeah.
could have been a good guy, but like then you did this thing and he's
Mm-hmm.
like the uber evil in the universe. So, you know, the idea that like you can get a hold of a man early enough and corrupt him, but you apparently can't do that with a daughter. And it's
Yeah.
like, why is that? Like, why do we feel that that's true? Where does that come from? Because
Yeah, I don't know.
we all go
Maybe,
along with that,
to
but like,
go, yeah, maybe to go touch back on the point, your original point, talking about things where we were both talking about, women's business and um, matriarchy. That if you're passing this down and you think of like, Wiccans or even in Mesopotamia, you have like high priestesses, and this
Right.
idea that because women can produce life, they're the only ones that can take it away. But I think even as witches have gone away, the idea that men wouldn't be able to handle this magic, that it would just naturally corrupt them. Because if you think about charm, like the major villains are men, and there's very few witches that come at them. If they
Yeah.
do, they are fully demonic and monstrous. And even like the biggest, I guess you could say, antagonist, like with this huge arc spanning from the first three sisters, we have Prue, Piper, and Phoebe, mainly Phoebe being the link, and over to when Paige joins, is that Cole storyline from
Yeah.
him like infiltrating, falling in love with Phoebe, and then maybe trying to bring her over to his side. It doesn't really truly work because she has the bond of her sisters, and then being once again having to destroy him with the help of another sister that they never knew were there, you know, and this back and forth, will Cole be good or evil? I remember that storyline. Because he's half human and half demon, but he's unable to resist his evil part. But yeah, I found that what you're touching on is incredibly interesting because
Yeah,
yeah,
because Wyatt is half witch and half white lighter. Like
he
he's
should
an
never tip
angel.
over. Yes.
Why was that such a, but that ended up taking over. Like I didn't watch the last few seasons, but I remember the season after he was born into like when his
Chris.
little, yeah, when Chris showed up.
Mm-hmm.
That really ends up being a huge story arc that really dominates that show, which is just
Mm-hmm.
like, it's like Saving Private Wyatt. Like how do we make
Yes.
sure that this kid doesn't grow up to be the uber evil of the world? And I'm like, but
Mm-hmm.
why are we so keen on believing that just because he's
Mm-hmm.
a boy? And I don't
Yeah.
mean that as like a criticism of the show. I'm thinking, I just feel like it's very revealing
Mm-hmm.
of us that we were like, yeah, of course we're going to be worried about that. Like we were so like okay
Mm-hmm.
with that. Um, and it's like, you never worried that Leo is going to turn bad. At no
Yeah.
point was I ever worried about Leo ever being convinced of anything
Yeah. He
other
actually
than doing the
does
right
though.
thing.
He does for a little while. He goes a little crazy. He becomes an elder. Um,
Well, the elders were
I
always kind
kind
of suspect anyway.
of.
But like, I don't know about them. But I'm just saying, like, you're not worried about him and you're not worried about Piper doing that.
Mm-hmm.
So why are you so worried about their kid doing that?
Yeah.
Like, why does that become like
Yeah. I think
the way
yeah.
in?
Yeah. I feel like that's where Charm, like about season 6, where Charm starts to get a little crazy, and then like initially first run, I didn't really watch a majority of, I want to say the last part of season 6, early season 7, just because it was like, I think it's 7 seasons. It got uber crazy, and then they fake their death, and there's homeland land security. You're like, why is this
Oh
happening?
wow.
Um, and then the introduction of a new pair of sisters, Billy and Christy, who were supposed to compete with the charmed ones, and you're like, okay, just end this, and they did. but yeah, I feel like that's when the things started going off of the deep end as far as writing was concerned. But for me, as far as like Piper, uh, Prue, Piper, and Phoebe, like season 3 is probably my favorite. And to touch on, like you said, when they get angry at each other, I think it's called Power Outage, where Cole gets this demon that magnifies their anger, and the minute
Oh yeah.
they get mad at each other, it separates them, and they have to apologize and work together. I think Charm just, it's more about the, in a way, it's very much practical magic, if you want to use that word, of like there are some things, you know, the you're only powerful together, and that only happens when you're willing to do the work, because
Yeah.
initially they're not together, you know. Prue is trying to do her own business. She's, you know, I think she's like working for an advertisement company. Piper is the only one living in the house, and then Phoebe is off doing whatever she does, and it's about them learning to which I loved. It's about them being adults. It begins in their adult lives. These are, they discover their powers. And I think that's a huge difference about Charmed, is that it's like, okay, what if you late stage learn that you have powers?
Yeah.
I would love to see a new series, whether, some about adults being powerful, having grown up with something that, like, rather than this discovery, I get it. It's an easier, explainer about whatever, blah, blah, blah. It's like, how do you explain how to be a witch? And, power levels. You can always do that with a boyfriend, though, or like some kid they have. But, like, yeah, Charmed was very interesting. And then, as far as once Paige comes on board, I feel like season 5 is where it's at. And what winds up being their 100th episode is that time loop where they discover what happens if Paige never joins them. Um,
Oh,
and
right.
that alternate universe where Phoebe's married to Cole, but they hate each other, and Piper is now divorced for Leo, and she's become like some slayer running around.
Oh yeah, I vaguely remember that. But that show, like, constantly, the formula of that show is that we
Mm-hmm.
have to reconcile and
Mm-hmm.
work together, right? That's
Yeah.
what always ends up happening. We have to
Mm-hmm.
reconcile and work together. We have to reconcile, work together. Our powers are attached to our emotions. How many times did they say that? Our powers are attached to our emotions.
Mm-hmm.
So you literally have to, like, get your life together, like fix your life, and then handle the situation. Like, that was constantly,
Yeah, in a
those are the
way, it was
rules of that
like
universe,
constantly,
no matter
yeah,
what.
it was like the universe was their mom and was like, okay, you're arguing again. We're gonna just have to put you inside the room and you're gonna have to work
Right.
out. Last
Yeah,
touching
yeah.
on Buffy before we get out of here. Season 5, the addition of
Yeah,
Dawn. Do you want to have
sure.
any? Just because I said it earlier, otherwise I would have like sliced that off. Um, but any
No,
thoughts? The addition of
I just
Dawn.
quickly, I think that, like, that's another one where it's an interesting, somewhat good, somewhat bad relationship, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, they kind of cover the gambit of, like, this is sometimes a little toxic, this is sometimes the thing that is
Mm-hmm.
great. But what I love about the reason I suggested it is because it leans so hard into the sister trope that she didn't even exist for 5 seasons,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like,
Yeah.
Buffy's an only child,
Mm-hmm.
but at this point, the idea of sisterhood and that being a bond that is so strong that somebody might die for it is what drives season 5. Like, they introduced this sister well into the show's life, right? Like, it's been on for 4 years,
Yeah.
and then she hits the scene at the end of episode 1, season 5. She comes on at the very end,
Mm-hmm.
and no one explains who she is for 2 more episodes.
Yeah.
Like, she exists, and
Mm-hmm.
everybody just keeps calling her, and you're like, I don't understand what's happening,
Yeah.
but we go along with it because we're like, this is season 5 and we're gonna believe this, and
Mm-hmm.
I think it's such an interesting thing that he played on, where it's like, we just sent this weapon of mass destruction and we put it in your house.
Yeah.
We made her from you, and so because we made her a sister, we know that you'll protect her with your life. Like, it's an emotional manipulation of a
Mm-hmm.
bond that we all agree is sacred.
Yeah.
that
Uh, yeah.
that's the logic that it's working off of, and it works. Like, we, even though Buffy's like, you put that thing in my house, like, she's so upset about it, she can't help but be like, this is my sister now,
Yeah.
and she dies for her. Like,
Mm-hmm.
she
Yeah.
dies for this being that didn't even exist on this show for like 4 years, and I'm like, and it's great, it's epic. I love the end of season 5. I totally buy it. I'm like, yes, she should die in the magical sunlight. But,
Mm-hmm.
like, if I really take a step back and think about it, I'm like, that Dawn's not even human, and that's not her sister. And, like, I never thought that. And even
Mm-hmm.
the time that I've rewatched it, I've never gone there. I've never been like, she should just let her die, because who is
Yeah.
this thing?
Yeah.
You just kill her.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's a moment of that when the only way they deal with that is really the episode in which she discovers what she is, but from that point on, there's slight, I'm gonna say, okay, like from discovering what Dawn truly is, and that she's never been there, to about when Buffy mom's dies, there is this understanding where you can see Buffy kind of working it out and going back and forth, but she never really truly pushes Dawn away. And then once Joyce is gone, and I like that episode where Dawn is trying to bring Joyce back. To me, it solidifies in Buffy's head. Like she doesn't even question, because they have this whole argument at the end when Dawn has done this spell to bring her back. And Buffy knows and understands that Dawn is not a real thing, but talks to her just as like, Dawn, what have you done? You can't do this. It's now tipped over to that is her sister. And I think she's learned to just accept that, because it's a great scene as Dawn, like at any point in that conversation, Buffy could have just been like, you need to stop this because that's not even your real mom. She never does that. She talks to Dawn like in she like in that scene is this hugely emotional scene, because Dawn is like, it's like you're pushing me away, you don't want me to be here, blah blah blah. But from John's point of view, it's not even I'm this thing you're pushing away, it's like you've pushed me away as a person. And Buffy is like, no, mom's gone and someone has to, be the mom. And because she knew everything, someone has to take care of everything. And that's why I'm doing this. This is like these things I have to do. Someone has to arrange the funeral. Someone has to pay these bills.
Someone's got to make breakfast.
Someone's got to make breakfast. And if she, getting through the Dawn that if she really, truly didn't care, she would just like do the spell that would just like, I guess, unravel her or get rid of her. She doesn't have to. It's like she doesn't have to protect her from Glory. She doesn't, any of these things. But she never ever says this out loud.
It becomes a point of contention. Like this is why I think it's such a great use of the trope, because once it really hits the fan and they're like, Glory is a god. It's Giles who's like, we should kill her.
Yeah.
And he's the one who's like, shouldn't we kill? And then of course Anya's like, wouldn't it be easier? And I think it's Anya who's like, she's not actually really like, they put this thing in your head, but this is not your sister. It's a back and forth that happens, which is why like at the end when she's like, if anybody comes near Dawn, I'll kill them. It's because her team has all considered, wouldn't it just be easier to kill Dawn?
Let her
she's
unravel.
Not who we think she's not a person. Like we have these feelings about her, but like it's a manipulation. And it becomes real because Buffy says it's real, right? Like she's like, I will kill you if you try to kill her. But like that is like a shard that sort of like gets in between the group, even up to the end, where people really thought it might have been a better idea to kill her. And I think it's interesting that once it's like set that she's her sister, and that becomes the reality. Even in, you get to season 7 and Giles brings that up again. And he was like, what would you do now? And Buffy says, I would kill her. Like they revisit that again when he's like, how are you ready to make the hard choices and blah, blah, blah. They're like in a cemetery or something. They're always in a cemetery, whatever. But they bring that up again. And he's like, if faced with the same choice now, what would you do? And she's like, I would kill her. So resurrected Buffy is a very different person.
Well, she's also bitter.
And she acknowledged. She was in heaven. But like I think, at the growth of that is that at the end she acknowledges that like, that is a fiction. I did not grow up with a sister. And if faced between like, say, it would have been smarter to have killed Dawn before and make sure that Glory couldn't go anywhere instead of doing all the things that I did. But I just think that this is a very interesting use of this trope, like just to go back to horrible sisters. Like, I don't know if that's a good relationship or a toxic one. I don't know if Buffy should have killed her or died for her. Like, I'm not really sure. I kind of agree with her when she died for her. I also agree with her later when she's like, maybe you should have just killed her. Like, I think it's exciting that I think it's exciting that like I grew with her and like, you know, I believe both Buffys and I'm kind of like, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
Is it good? Is it bad? Like she's not real. She is real. Like what is a sisterly bond? You know, what is the difference between like blood sister and a chosen sister? What do we think? You know, there's the families that you're naturally related to, and then there's the families that you make. So
and then even in like any family, like people don't ever touch upon, or like I've seen play out in the press, you know, when it comes to like someone like Meghan Markle, right? Like she has her half sister that's just pranced around in the press as soon as she got started dating Harry, not even, and then she hasn't seen that sister in 11 years. But I will see in comments of whatever that people like to post up real quick, she hates her family, blah blah blah. It's like, well, she didn't grow up with that sister, and then she hasn't seen that sister in 11 years, and that cutoff wasn't because of Meghan. The cutoff was because of the sister. So I think exploring these tropes and seeing these different types of bonds, and even going back to Buffy, what makes someone your sister, what makes someone family, what makes them blood, and what these various definitions are, that can we allow each other to explore that, and can we allow someone to make the choices they need to make for them without having this judgment of like, well, that's your sister. It's like, well, there's a story behind it. You don't know if that person's like an orb that was given to me, you know? Or like sometimes in regular human life where it's like, well, that doesn't work out, you know. Some people are toxic, and you know, whether it's in a supernatural sense or a real sense, you got to let those relationships play out as they will, you know. Some sisters are the ones you're born with, and some
sisters are the ones you choose. I think it's worth noting there.
And they could be toxic either
all
way.
Of these different I think ultimately all of these films and TV series really just kind of are like, family is hard.
Yes. Family is hard.
That's the real bottom line.
And we can like now just end on that, like after all these movies, like family's hard.
Family's hard.
Right. All right, Wi-Moto, I want to thank you so much for joining me, and I hope
thank you for having me. This was fun.
Thank you. And I was glad I could introduce you to some movies, and and we can look out for your podcast, Black Women is Scary. And
yes, thank you. And I'm so glad that you did this, because I don't know if I would have found out about these movies. And I mean, Practical Magic I had seen, and I hadn't watched it in a while, so it was kind of like, oh, let me watch this. And I've Charmed I've seen recently, both versions. But yeah, Ginger Snaps and Whatever Happened to Baby Jane were such gems, and so I'm so glad that I was able to like watch them and talk about them with somebody.
Thank you so much. And it's quite honestly, like I was just happy to rewatch these anyway. Like especially going through Charm, I'm like, I forgot this episode. Like I couldn't watch everything, but I was like, okay, let me get some reminder episodes of what these sisters 3 are. All right, thank you very much.